Hey, it's Deepesh, and in this video I want to give you a few examples of running the graduation framework and some of the things to look out for and how to go about structuring it as well. So in this first example, I'm looking at an account where we ran the graduation framework for two different categories. So for this particular account, we had suits and jackets, and they were for children, and we tested both categories against three different audiences, so a lookalike of 1% of existing customers, fans of friends, and also fans as well directly, to see how they would react to the creative and the products within that as well. Within each of the ad sets, we were also cycling different products as the lead product and to bring people to the category page for this specific account. And so you can see the permutations here. So jackets and suits, and then the different audiences. And then within the ad set itself, we then ran multiple variants of those images as well. So this is just a 1 month period, just to demonstrate for this period. We had 3 ads running, but we have others lined up ready to test as well. And they're different images, different copy, which we'd kind of test out through that as well. And so if I go back into the ad set level, just to illustrate kind of how the testing went on, we were testing on £10 a day for these different ad sets. Now, as best practice, I try and aim for 5,000 impressions to give me good confidence that these stats are sustainable and the CTR or CPC isn't just a one-off. On the flip side, I can tell pretty early on if something is also not doing so well as well. Now, the magic number for Facebook is 500 impressions. It's what Facebook uses for its calculation of relevance score. And quite often there's two things to look out for. Number one, if you don't get good performance in the first 500 impressions, you could duplicate the ad set and try again, because sometimes Facebook is throwing its hook into the ocean, it's put it in the wrong area and not brought back the right customers. For me, this is a page post engagement objective, and so I know that the pool that Facebook is going into is going to be quite broad, but based on my audience. But conversely, if I see ad sets that are working quite well, in particular these two ad sets for the lookalikes were working far better, I wasn't really worried about testing these ad sets. So that's something you can come back to. If an ad set doesn't seem to be working, you can always pause, duplicate, restart it to try and see if you can kickstart it back in. And what I'm looking at in particular here is the cost per click and the click-through rate. So actually the images for the account are around 1.5 to 1.8% on click-through rate, and the cost per click is kind of anywhere around the 0.5, 0.8 range. So when I'm running a page post engagement test, I'm just looking for metrics that give me the evidence that on a page post engagement campaign, the ad set and the creative are giving me good performance. So these two are good for me. They've given me a good CPC and a good CTR. But because this has a funnel, and not all campaign objectives will, but for e-commerce you can track further down the process, I want to actually see how many people are getting to cart, how many people are actually buying. So people buying on a page post engagement campaign is a strong indicator that you've hit the right audience and things are going well, but it's not the only indicator. So for example, here we have this fans campaign which had a £3.25 cost per click, 0.25 CTR, but actually did generate a 4.3 ROAS, which obviously looks great, but the traffic's quite low, and I've discounted that out because that wasn't giving me the strong enough front end metrics, and that's what I'm looking at here. If these metrics are good, and I'm seeing actually good traction through, and what I'm looking for is, are people getting to cart and how many as well, then that tells me that this audience and the creatives within there are actually doing really, really well as well. So that for me gives me confidence that the audiences are ready now to go into website conversion, and the ads within that, whichever ones are performing, are also ready as well. So like if we just look at the ad level now, and we look at the average of the ad set for CPC and CTR, I want to identify which ones are actually performing better than the others. So here you can see the CPCs are around the same mark. So the ad set performance is generally doing well overall. We have one ad here that has a far better click-through rate than the average and much better than the other two. And if you look through the kind of metrics further through, you look at the kind of add to cart rate. It's kind of generally on par, 6/108, 3/70. This one has got the kind of higher share of the budget, and that's something to keep an eye on as well. If you do want your other ad sets to get more traffic, as you are spending more in your page post engagement testing, to consider pausing the ads out, giving others a chance to cycle. If you absolutely want to test ads to make sure they're getting enough traffic, then you can split the same ad set out 3 times, for example, run 1 ad in each. I prefer to do it this way. It's quicker for me, and it just means less headache in managing multiple ad sets as well. So that's down to your particular preference. So these 3 ads generally all performed well, and they're pushing people through into the cart page as well. So that for me is an ad set that's ready to be graduated, plus all 3 ads are ready to be graduated. The next step would be to pause these ads out and continue testing different ads. And what you want to do at that point is, once you've moved your ad set into a website conversion campaign, it's then going to start becoming your money maker. Ads should be now pressing on, and you've got 3 ads cycling through. At some point, as you start to scale up, those ads will start to fatigue. So you want new ads to come in, and that's where I'd be pushing more ads into the mix. So that's to give you an example of the graduation strategy. For e-commerce, you're looking at how far people are getting down the funnel. If you're getting this kind of CTR rate and people are bouncing off, and you look at the outbound clicks, the landing page views, if people are not getting into the landing page view, that's not great. If people are getting to the landing page view and not into the cart, it's a signal that it may not be as successful in WC. But like this, if we are getting people through the funnel, that's a strong indicator that it will work in WC as well. Now, for lead gen, where your funnel is probably smaller, where you get someone to a landing page and sign up, then you want to look at, are people getting to the landing page? You probably will get people to signing up as well, but the gap between that might not be enough to look at funnel metrics. For app install, I'm looking at running the ads in PPE and sending them to the app install page. And a recent change with Facebook is you can't put the app link into your button on a page post engagement. So I would put it into the body just to test the ads out and see if the ads are actually attracting people into the app. But with app installs, it's a lot faster to test because the app install objective is a lot broader than website conversion. So the graduation strategy doesn't necessarily have to be used for app install. I primarily use it for e-commerce and lead gen, especially where there's a page to send lead gen off to as well. So that's that example. The second example I want to give is this account here, where we've gone through and put different interests in, just to give you an idea of how this works at the interest level. So the audiences are all the same, so male, female, 21 to 55, desktop and mobile. And we're purely testing interests. So within each of these ad sets, they're running exactly the same ads. And there's a range of video ads that are running in there. And what we want to do is find the ads that are performing best. Now in this account, the average for click-through rate is about 0.5%, and the average for cost per click is about £1.50 to £2. So we can see here that it isn't as good as the website conversion campaign, but this is page post engagement, and I want to find the indicators that are working. So I can see here, for example, the click-through rate for this particular interest and the one below, so Gusto and Holland and Barrett, are good comparatively to the rest, and also against the account average are not far off. CPC could be better, but with this particular test, we've given it enough impressions to give us confidence that we can sustain that, and they would be 2 that I would graduate in terms of the interest groupings into a website conversion campaign to see if we can push it further, and then to keep cycling those ads that have been successful in page post engagement into the website conversion as well. Also, when you are moving interests and you've tested interest by interest at this level, when you move them into website conversion, where possible, I would group them together at that stage. Now, with these particular interests here, if you know these companies or not, some of these interests are quite different. So this particular interest is actually a fashion brand. This is vitamins and well-being, fashion brand, vitamins, and a food delivery service. I would group those personally into those groupings. So Holland and Barrett, Vitabiotics, Vita Coco, for example, if they did graduate from PPE, I would group those into the same interest in website conversion, because if you know these interests are working, bigger traffic equals better response from website conversion, for example, or lead gen, or whichever objective you're going for. So I want to make sure that I'm giving as much as possible. However, if your creative isn't different, then group them all together. The reason I would have done I do the interests separately is because for Fabletics, Sweaty Betty, they're fashion brands, and the creative that works for these people is different to the creative that works for the non-fashion brands. So that's a reason to group those separately in my website conversion. And then the kind of third example I want to give is a question on how much should I be spending of my budget on testing. When you're starting off, your test budget will be a lot higher than when you're scaling, for example. So this account, for example, we were spending anywhere between 10 and 15% of our budget on testing. And you can see right now, of the 51K that's gone in on our PPE test, only 1,400 has been spent, which is a tiny percentage of the overall budget. But that budget is still being tested, so it's still in the background. That 1,400 in this month is a lot higher than it was when we started out. But that just gives you an idea that you can't have necessarily a set test budget, especially if you're starting to scale up. You're spending 50K a month, 100K a month, 300K a month. It's not as easy to say, X percent is your test budget. But really, it's based on what you're testing within that and how many ad sets and how many things you're working on at the same time as well. So, for example, if we have a look at this ad set, this campaign here, for example, and let's have a look at the click-through rates, and we prioritize it by the biggest response on click-through rate. So this account, on average, CPC, we get about $0.8, just under $1. And click-through rate we get between kind of 1.5, 1.6 roughly. So we can see here, for example, versus the overall for this test campaign, this particular interest here has done really well, both on CPC and click-through rate as well. And we're getting clicks and we're getting some adds to cart as well. So that's the kind of indicator that I'm looking at. So again, in this example, the vitamin shop and cosmetics would be ones that have been graduated. Ideal Shape, 310 Nutrition as well. And then you kind of go through, and maybe Nature Box wouldn't be one that would go through. So that's how I'd go through picking out which interests that I want to now graduate to my website conversion. And kind of this is another example of splitting out those tests, and within the ad sets, I'm testing lots of different creatives as well. So what you want to determine is it my ad set that's not working, or is it my creative? And so if I'm cycling creatives within the ad set and the ad set still doesn't perform, it's probably the ad set that needs to be pivoted or changed or just paused out. If you've tested a few ads and the ad set starts performing, then you know that that particular ad is working. And it could be the offer, it could be the copy. It's all things that you need to experiment and play with to try and get the response within that as well. Now, these ads that I've shown you are carousel, static, summer video as well. One question I've had is, could you test using video views campaign? Yes, the video views objective is, for all intents and purposes, exactly the same as a page post engagement when it comes to reach and the type of people you're going for. It's looking at video engagement, obviously, over a page post. But the other advantage of video views is you get video tools that you don't within the page post engagement. So if you're testing videos specifically, there's no harm in doing that with a video views campaign, using the same graduation strategy as I do in page post engagement. And you can kind of then use, what I would use is the cost per 10-second view, and keeping that below 0.1 of a dollar, so 10 cents essentially, and seeing how many people are actually getting, what percentage are actually getting to that 10-second view, or 25% as well, depending on how long your video is, to give you the validation that the video and the ad set are working as well. And kind of one final point is, when it comes to testing, this is a recommended structure. You might have your own preferences for testing and bringing ads into your website conversion. One of the questions is, well, why can't I test in website conversion, and why use page post engagement or video views for testing? The point is that when you're running a website conversion campaign, and you've got a given audience, let's say 1 million or 10 million, whatever it is, the website conversion objective is just pulling out a small subset of that audience that are potentially ready to buy. And if you haven't really tested your audiences and creatives within that, you could be discounting an audience out because they're in the buying mode, but your creative just didn't work for them. When you go for a page post engagement, it expands the audience out. You've got more people to play with. They may or may not be in market, but they are still, close to your ideal customer. Facebook is, it's a prediction engine. It's predicting that someone is in buying mode, or they're in browsing mode, or they're in clicking mode, or viewing mode, or whatever it is. And so for me, PPE gives me a better range of those people. I might sometimes capture buyers. I might sometimes just capture people that are browsing. But if they're interested, then they will interact with my ad. And that's really what I'm looking for. And that's why this strategy works for me. And it helps me to minimize the wasted spend in my app install campaigns, in my lead gen campaigns, in my website conversion campaigns, to make sure I've tested things first. So, as a final recap, use page post engagement for testing and testing your graduation framework. Test audiences, test interest, lookalikes, etc. at your ad set level, and give some kind of variation for your ads. Give them, ideally I'm aiming for 5,000 impressions minimum to give me confidence that the numbers are sustainable. Sometimes you'll see that within 1,000, maybe 2,000 impressions where the stats are all over the place, the CPMs, the CPC, etc. But that's the essential way that you want to be running the graduation strategy, to make sure you're testing those ads and graduating the right ones to make your campaign as successful as it can be.